Last month, we revisited some cool British singles released in January 1966. Now, it's time to do the same with February of that year. And February 1966 was a particularly great month for singles. So, without further ado, let's have a look at some cool British singles released that month.
You better stop and look around. Here it comes.
February 1966 saw the release of 19th Nervous Breakdown by the Rolling Stones. The song was recorded in late 1965 at RCA Studios in Hollywood, and engineered by Dave Hassinger, who also worked with many other iconic bands such as the Byrds, Jefferson Airplane, and the Grateful Dead, among many others. Just like some other Stones tunes from that period such as Mother's Little Helper, the song featured great social commentary lyrics by Jagger. The track is also known for Bill Wyman's so-called dive-bombing bass line at the end. The B-side was As Tears Go By. Jagger and Richards originally handed out this song to Marianne Faithfull in 1964. Marianne's version became a massive hit in the UK, so the Stones opted to issue their own version as the B-side of this single. In the States, however, As Tears Go By was released as a single in December 1965, reaching number 6 according to Billboard. At the time, both fans and critics complained that 19th Nervous Breakdown featured Jagger too low in the mix. Brian Jones addressed the complaints when he was asked to reply to letters by readers of Record Mirror. A reader called Pauline Phillips wrote,
"On the Stones' new record, Mick's voice is half hidden by the backing, which is much too loud. It's been getting this way for the last few records. Can anyone tell me why?"
Brian Jones said, "With the Rolling Stones, not Mick Jagger. He has done As Tears Go By on his own, but he doesn't set out to be the only one on records. Mick sings and we play instruments. It's us. It's an integrated group thing. No one's trying to drown Mick out." Despite the complaints, the song got mostly positive reviews in the press, and the single reached number 2 in both the UK and the US. It became the 5th best-selling single of 1966 in Britain, achieving greater full-year sales than These Boots Are Made for Walking by Nancy Sinatra and the Stones' own Paint It Black.
Have you got the Rolling Stones' latest one? It's 19th Nervous Breakdown. You know it.
Number 6.
Ah, thank you. Like to hear.
Pursuing all the latest fads and trends, 'cause he's a dedicated follower of fashion.
Dedicated Follower of Fashion was one of the first Kinks songs that saw them change their style to songs full of wry observation on contemporary life. Ray Davies poked fun at the burgeoning world of swinging 60s Britain, Carnaby Street, and mod culture. But of course, the Kinks were very much at the epicenter of that world. The song demonstrates the very British propensity for both celebrating and mocking the country's own culture. The single got positive reviews in the press. Record Mirror wrote,
"What a change of style for the boys. A Ray Davies composition with striking guitar backing and cymbals, and amusing lyrics delivered rather in the style of Joe Brown. But the beat is there, and it also has sing-along sequences. The song could arouse anti-feelings for some fans, but it comes off well for our money."
The B-side was another excellent song called Sitting on My Sofa. The single reached number 4 on the UK singles chart, and it reached the top of the charts in the Netherlands and New Zealand. In the States, however, it failed to enter the top 30, stalling at number 36.
The Yardbirds of Shapes of Things. Number 4 this week on the Caroline Countdown of Sound.
Shapes of Things is one of the Yardbirds' greatest achievements and one of the most innovative songs of 1966. The song, which was written by the Yardbirds themselves, featured anti-war and pro-environmental lyrics, sudden time changes, and exotic melodies. But the highlight of the track was Jeff Beck's innovative use of controlled feedback and sustain. The song is widely considered to be one of the first, if not the first psychedelic song. Just to put things into context, this track was released a month before 8 Miles High by the Byrds, and over 6 months before Revolver by the Beatles. The Yardbirds played a major role in introducing new sounds and influences to the musical landscape of the mid-60s. Along with See My Friend by the Kinks, their song Heart Full of Soul, released in 1965, was the first British pop song to feature Indian influences, both songs predating Norwegian Wood by the Beatles by half a year. The B-side was an excellent song written by Manfred Mann's drummer Mike Hug.
Mister, you're a better man than I. Yeah, Mister, you're a better man.
The song had already appeared on the Yardbirds' second album, released in November 1965. The single got positive reviews in the press, although most reviewers seemed to agree that it wasn't as commercial as some of their previous releases. But Shapes of Things became a big hit, reaching number 3 in the UK and number 11 in the States.
The thoughts of freedom, they're driving me wild. I'll be happy like a newborn child.
Inside Looking Out is one of the toughest songs the Animals ever released as a single. And it was the first record they released for Decca Records after leaving Columbia. The New Musical Express wrote,
Developed by Eric Burdon and Chaz Chandler from the original by the well-known folk blues specialist John Lomax, this is basically a prison song. And Eric gives it full treatment, singing from the heart, and feeling the very essence of the blues. Strident guitar chords are his only accompaniment at the outset. Then, reverberating bass steadily builds the tension, until it erupts into a wild rhythm and blues raver, with Eric blowing his top and the boys hammering home the backing for all they're worth. Yeah, their first Decca disc is a gas.
The B-side was Outcast, a great tune with a fantastic memorable riff and another great vocal performance by Eric Burdon.
I'm just an outcast. Don't know how long I'm gonna last.
The single reached number 12 in the UK and number 34 in the States.
The weight of Oz. Dave D. Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch. Hold tight. 13 before 1. Swinging Radio England with much more music. Larry Dean till 2 o'clock. Ronald Quinn 2 to 6 p.m.
Dave D. Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch got their first taste of big success when Hold Tight unexpectedly rose to number 4 in Britain. With the exception of You Make It Move, which reached number 26, all their previous releases had failed to chart.
We've had a lot of groups on Blue Peter, and some of them have had some very funny names. Well, today we've got another group, and they couldn't think of a name to call themselves, so they put all their nicknames together. Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch. And here they are singing Hold Tight.
Hold Tight, with its great fuzz guitar riff and undeniably catchy melody, marked the beginning of a period of enormous popularity for the group. Between 1966 and 1968, Dave D and company scored 8 top 10 hits in the UK. And the band also enjoyed huge success in several European countries, especially in Germany. The song was written by Howard and Blakely, and recorded at Fontana's studio in Marble Arch, London. Despite the big success of the song in the UK, Hold Tight, just like most of the group's releases, failed to enter the charts in the States. The song enjoyed a new lease of life in the early 2000s when it was featured in Quentin Tarantino's film Death Proof.
No. It's Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mitch, and Titch. So you got it? Thanks, honey. You're gonna play it next song, right?
Who do you want to hear?
Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mitch, and Titch.
Who the fuck are they?
For your information, Pete Townsend at one point almost quit The Who, and if he had, he would have ended up in this group, thus making it Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mitch, Titch, and Pete. And if you ask me, he should have. That's my boy!
Can't Let Go by the Hollies is widely considered to be one of the earliest examples of power pop. And it certainly has many of the elements that came to define power pop later in the 70s. The original version of the song had been recorded by singer Evie Sands in 1965, although the Hollies arrangement was quite different from the original. Record Mirror wrote,
Better than their last, this one is a very lively beater full of spirited vocal work that makes the Hollies stand out in any company. A rather complicated vocal harmony approach with a sort of wave-upon-wave arrangement, and with fair shrieks of vocal falsetto. A good song.
The single peaked at number 2 in the UK, and number 42 in the US. Later in the early 80s, Linda Ronstadt covered the song and took it to number 31 on the Billboard chart.
I thought I knew her every sound, her smile, her tear, her ups and downs.
February 1966 saw the release of the Troggs' debut single. Lost Girl was written by the band's lead singer Reginald Ball, who still hadn't changed his name to Reg Presley. The song already featured all the elements that came to define the Troggs' back-to-basics approach: raw and stripped-up sound, and primitive, almost tribal drum patterns. However, the single didn't mean a thing in the charts, and it barely garnered any airplay upon release. According to Reg Presley, the song was only played one time on Radio Luxembourg at 3 a.m. The Troggs later reused the melody and drum pattern for the song From Home, which appeared as the B-side of Wild Thing. Record Mirror wrote,
"Lively new group on a fast drum-dominated beat ballad. Okay, but not too different."
The single failed to chart, but it became a top 10 hit in Sweden when it was reissued a few months later following the success of Wild Thing. The Action were one of the best and most underrated mod bands of the 60s. They were the sort of group who always seemed to be on the verge of making it, but the charts always eluded them. I'll Keep Holding On, which was originally released by the Marvelettes in 1965, is a big favorite among fans of the band. The Melody Maker wrote,
"A North London five-man group, with a very Tamla Motown sound on their revival of the Marvelettes number. Produced by George Martin, The Action have a stunning vocal and polished instrumental sound which will earn them a hit very soon. Not sure if this track is strong enough to push them high in the chart though."
Despite the group's popularity in clubs all over Britain, the single only managed to reach number 46 on the Melody Maker chart.
My boss man works my fingers to the bone. I just wanna sleep when I get home.
The Creation were another excellent mod band with very limited success in Britain, although they enjoyed decent success in Germany. Prior to changing their name to The Creation, the band was called the Mark IV. The group featured John Dalton on bass, who ended up joining the Kinks in 1969 after original bassist Pete Quaife left the band. The Mark IV were formed in 1964, and this was their fourth and last single. Shortly after this release, John Dalton was replaced by Bob Garner and the band changed their name to The Creation. Work All Day, Sleep All Night was a good song about not conforming to the conservatism of the old generation, one of many 60s songs about the generation gap. The intro was a good example of the sort of early psychedelic sounds that were starting to emerge in Britain at the time. Record Mirror wrote,
"Bit of a rave from lead voice with an all-happening backing. Good group effort with a pedantic sort of heat. Good for dancing."
The single, just like all their releases, failed to chart.
You don't love me, yes I know now.
Gary Walker, a member of the Walker Brothers, unexpectedly released a very good solo single in February 1966. You Don't Love Me featured some great fuzzy guitar sounds, and an overall excellent job by his backing band The Vibrations, who also worked as the Walker Brothers backing band. The New Musical Express asked him about the single. Gary said, "I wanted to do something really funky, like the Stones. This one's really slangy. I like to do all the real screaming things, dirty and sexy. This record will probably make it, and Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra will kill themselves." The record certainly didn't make it, and it's quite odd that he decided to release a solo single in February 1966, especially considering that the Walker Brothers themselves also released a new single in February. And it wasn't just another new single by the Walkers, it became the group's most successful single in both the UK and the US. This was one of the greatest singles the Walker Brothers ever released. A marvelous song written by Bob Crewe and Bob Gaudio, with a fantastic production that was very much inspired by Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. As previously stated, it became their most successful single. The song reached number 1 in Britain, and it also became their highest charting song on the Billboard chart in the US. The single also hit the top 10 in Canada, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Norway. On the other hand, the Gary Walker single failed to chart.
You're bad little woman. You're gonna ruin me, baby, with your bad ways.
This great slice of garage rock is another highlight of February 1966. The Wheels were formed in Belfast in the early 60s, and they're often associated with Van Morrison, since they came from the same music scene. Van Morrison was even a member of the band for a short period of time. Bad Little Woman starts off as a cool bluesy number, and it keeps building up in tempo until eventually, it starts to sound like the sort of stuff that bands like the Stooges were doing in the late 60s. It's certainly one of the most aggressive songs of 1966. The single failed to chart, but later in 1966, American garage rockers The Shadows of Night released an excellent cover of the song.
So stop, stop, stop. Oh honey, I'll be gone.
By February 1966, future 10cc founding member Graeme Goldman had already written hits for groups such as the Yardbirds and the Hollies. However, the singles he released with his own band the Mockingbirds never managed to chart. And this, his first solo release, didn't fare much better. Record Mirror wrote,
Hit writer Graeme Goldman demonstrates a fine voice touched with blues feeling on a fastish and original-sounding self-penned composition. A good arrangement, outsider for the charts.
It was a good song, but the single didn't mean a thing in the charts. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to January 1966. See you next time.